Hello, friend. Welcome, everyone, to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Mr. Robot Season 4, Episodes 12 and 13, which are actually just the finale, Part 1 and 2. Like, that's literally the title of the series finale, Part 1 and 2, so...
I mean, it's a bold choice to break all of your naming conventions like that.
Well, last week did it as well. Last week took away the numbers from the rest of the season, but these last two are just like... Yeah, we're just finale.
Yeah.
Which is...
I did see someone point out last week, though, that the capital X followed by the I is the Roman numeral for 11.
That still breaks the format, though.
It does, but the number was still in there in a way.
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely breaks the format, I agree.
Yeah. But, you know, so just series finale. And it's not even just those ones that it breaks the format, is that, like, the entire show, even though it changed for this season to the error codes as opposed to the file names, is that the entire thing was very stylized. It was very, we've got a thing in place, right? Even though we changed it at one point, it was still a new sort of stylistic computer-related system.
Yeah, and this is so mundane to the point where I don't think I've ever seen a show do just series finale as the title of its episode at the end.
Yeah, very weird, but... so we're going to get into, obviously, full spoilers for the show as a whole now at this point. It's weird to say that, but here we are. And we're recording this a day later than planned. Unfortunately, we had some other stuff to record last night and we couldn't do it. The interesting part of this, though, is that by the time this goes up, it will be Christmas Day. So you're getting... So Merry Christmas, Mr. Robot finale on Christmas Day. Enjoy.
I expect they're all still listening to this on Christmas Day. Why wouldn't they be?
I think they will be.
I mean, what could be better?
Mr. Robot's more important than Christmas. There, I said it.
Obviously.
So, yeah, we're going to get into it. I got notes. Although, funnily enough, my notes for the first episode of the two aren't actually that detailed because it's actually really straightforward and sequential.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's quite interesting how these, as a pair, you know, I think do some not entirely surprising things. It's things we've been talking about. But it actually presents it quite straightforwardly throughout, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of... Obviously, we had the weird what the hell, you know, kind of like reveal of this world last episode, you know, the last 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is this first episode, for the most part, is just the other side of it, is R. Elliot's journey as from when he wakes up to when he meets, you know, Felliot, as I'm calling him for now. Why Felliot? Because this is Earth F. So Felliot.
Yes. I've seen that being used a lot.
Yeah, I saw it this week as well, which is why I've adopted it.
I saw it like immediately after we finished our review last week.
Joe, I like it though. I like that on this show it's not Earth 1 and 2, it's Earth E and Earth F. I like that.
Yeah, why not? Be different.
But yeah, so yeah, we'll get into it. Obviously we'll have most of our discussion will probably be about the ending in the last, you know, 15-20 minutes of the second half, but for all intents and purposes, this is one big episode. For whatever reason, they chose not to edit it as one episode and still had, you know, end credits and...
Yeah, I mean, there is a definitive point where this was the first episode, and, you know, and I liked it in the sense that it meant the second episode could have an intro that worked really well as a true, you know, final episode.
But at the same time, that's the thing, I still kind of see this first half as the start of the final episode, because it feels like one story. And I get having a version of it that is split in two for, you know, reruns and things like that, but the second half does, I mean, it repeats the last like 30 seconds of the first one and just starts immediately, and it's like, yeah, this could easily have been edited together to just roll into it. Even the music that plays in the opening is the music that played in the end credits for the end of the first half.
I'll tell you the main reason why, I suspect, is they wanted the big, you know, Mr. Robot showing up, like, you know, in the credits, and if you edit it into one, that would feel really out of place. Whereas if you just present it as two episodes, you get away with it.
Yeah, I suppose. So on the music, actually, the music that's introduced at the end of the first episode and plays a couple of times in the second one, the sort of darker theme. No pun intended, because it sounded very like Dark. There was it really sounded like the main theme from Dark.
Yes, yeah, it did.
Which really stuck out to me. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think it was intentional per se, but.
I doubt it. No.
Yeah, but it definitely gave me that vibe. Anyway, so Elliot's talking to us again. We start off. It's just him narrating, saying, "Hello, friend. Are you there? Have you been there this whole time?" And I've just been too preoccupied to notice.
And it's like, yep. We have.
Which, I mean, let's be fair, we expected him to talk to us again for the ending. Like, we never once considered the idea that he wouldn't talk to us again before the show ended.
It was a complete foregone conclusion. There was no way it wouldn't happen.
Yeah, so, there's rumbling, the earthquake is happening that we saw last episode, at least one of, and he gets up and he's where the planet should be, but it's not there. So that's the first episode really plays into the idea that this is an alternate Earth, right? Much like we've been speculating and talking about. The second episode very quickly makes you feel like it isn't. Like, I'd say that the dreamlike qualities that make it feel fake start to really become apparent very quickly in the second half. Now, there's still a little of it there. Very early on in this episode, actually. It got really obvious in the second one, but it was very quickly, and this is he's walking through the streets, where I noticed that every single car was white, and that's kind of surreal. Weird. Yeah. At first I thought they were even all the same make, and then when I looked closer, they weren't, but they were all white cars. It was, it stuck out to me. So, I mean, he's questioning things. He's like, nah, this has to be bullshit. White Rose was crazy. This can't be real. But Mr. Roboto starts playing. Sam Esmail held off until the finale.
I like that those jokes have been made since the very first episode. With good reason. And it's great, isn't it? If you're going to do it, might as well just do it in style at the end and own it.
So, obviously he stumbles across the Mr. Robot store. And again, all this just kind of plays out as we expect it to, based on what we saw last time. Because obviously, as soon as he sees that store, you're like, oh, he was the one in the store who disappeared. He's the one who dropped the phone. All these things just click in place, and he catches a glimpse of his father and runs out.
Because he's terrified of him. He's like, it's like, my monster's still alive here.
Yeah. But he follows him back to the house, and it's still the childhood home that he grew up in. The girl on the scooter, who I think we incorrectly assumed was Darlene back in episode 4, season 1.
I think she's still very much supposed to represent Darlene in that scene. Everything about it reads that way. I'm
pretty sure it's the same actress though, because she looks like the same person. But obviously because she was like 7, she's now 11, so she looks much.
You could be right. I mean, it's hard to say.
I'm fairly certain it is, because she looks like this looks like the same kid who's now like, because 5 years have passed, she's shot up from being a little kid to being like late preteen, or even just start teenage years.
I'm with you. There are still plausible reasons as to why she could look like Darlene would have done.
Sure. But obviously she says, because she's like, hey Elliot, who's Darlene?
Yeah.
You have a sister, what are you talking about?
As she leaves, she starts whistling Ferro Joker, which is what in that episode 4, is what she's whistling there as well. Just in case you didn't quite get it, it does very firmly link it back to that.
So the mum comes out, sees Elliot, is like, what are you doing over there? Come over here. Don't be silly. Stop messing around. Talks about our new curtains, and how one little change has made everything feel so fresh. I noted that particular statement down just because I feel like it stuck out. And of course, he's looking at all the photographs. He's seeing like him with his parents, but no Darlene. Hell, he even says her name out loud at one point, and the mum's like, "Hey, who's Darlene?" But he's like, "Hey, I need to check." He goes upstairs. He needs to check the window. He needs to check, did that happen? And notably, his room's moved as well. The door that he was expecting to be his room is now just a closet. And I don't know if you could just argue that's because that's where the baggage is kept. You shove it in a closet. I don't know if.
I mean, simple. You could, sure.
But he sees his bedroom, and there's trophies, and it's all neat, and it's like, this doesn't feel like Elliot. This feels normal and
healthy.
Yeah. And even asks like, "Hey, did you ever hurt me? Did Dad ever hurt me?" And of course, as the loving version of the mother in this universe is like, "What? No, we would never hurt you."
It's a pretty weird question, right?
Yeah. But of course, this is where she says, "Hey, it's natural you're nervous before the big day tomorrow." And he's like, "Big date? What? What's happening tomorrow?" Like, you're marrying Angela. Angela's here. And this, of course, is where the temptation, if you will, of is this world real starts to... Because up until now, he's just doubting it. And even after this, he's saying to us, like, hey, I'm not buying this shit, not until I see her.
Yeah.
And she's very much the trigger throughout the episode that makes him believe more and more that this could be a place...
She's kind of in the same way we've been talking about Darlene, right? In this way, she everything revolves around her.
Yeah. Well, she's kind of. This is the thing. After watching the whole finale, like, I've seen the jokes made about this online, but I was thinking this during the episode as well. Is that Darlene by the end of this? Like, I'm referring to her as Elliot's totem, a la Inception. If she's there, what's happening is real. And that's probably true for the whole show. If Darlene's there, then there's nothing fake about what's happening.
Yeah.
And I bet that holds up. I bet if we go back and watch it, I bet that holds up. So, whereas Angela's here's kind of the fake one. She's dangling in front of him as a, hey, this is the world you want, right? But he goes to Angela's, and as we were kind of speculating last week, Price is there. He's the father. Angela's mum's there. They're very loving. He's wearing, like, you know, the retired old man, like, you know, shirt and pants. He's all friendly. He's cracking jokes about, I'm evil incarnate, you know, you should be scared of me. I'm the father-in-law.
And it's all, it only feels sinister because of who Price has been throughout the show. It's all perfectly, you know, very classic father-in-law stuff.
Yeah, and the mom brings up the present, the present he got for her, and he's looking at the photos again, and like again being tempted with the illusion of this world. And notably, when Price makes him a drink and they're all like saying cheers, he kind of smiles for the first time in the episode, like he's kind of like being sucked into the fantasy.
It's working.
But then, of course, the phone rings, and this explains the phone call from last episode where Feliot called, and it was weird that the phone was answered but just hung up after. Because Price thinks it's a trick. It's like, oh, you're good with gadgets, you know, you're playing a trick on us. And Elliot answers and he hears his own voice, and that's kind of like, okay, there's another me here as well. Which
I love how the entire style of the shooting shifted here, because up till this point, it follows on, you know, in the fake sheen, the very standard networky style that we'd had from you know the last.
You're saying the headroom comes back in, is what you're saying?
It does, and you know, and it does little bits like glitchy stuff. You know, when he gets out on the street, it kind of just jumps through things really quickly, and it feels more like Mr. Robot.
Yeah. So one thing I noticed as well when he's out in the street, both in this one and the second one, is there's like an advert for Heroes, and I don't know if it's specifically the Heroes TV show, because I don't remember if that was an actual logo that they used or
it didn't look like
whatever.
It to me.
But USA Network and NBC are, you know, both Universal, so I mean it could be without much effort. And I mean that's it. They've used copyright material, you know, they've paid for elsewhere, sure, true as well. Yeah. But given where this goes and how much we've referred to Elliot as a superhero throughout the show, you know,
and we get that, you know, I think it's at the start of the second episode, actually, we get that discussion.
Yeah, and I think even on this poster it says Heroes, and underneath it says like evil never wins, or something, or evil. There's a line about evil, and that really stuck out to me, especially in the second watch when I was watching it again today. So he goes to his own apartment, and he's looking through, you know, basically he's looking for that booklet of CDs where all the info is, and it's not quite. Instead, it's just family photos. It's the history of his life, but in a more normal way.
And he's just like, this guy is not me.
But he's looking on the computer. He's looking on the Mac. And he eventually finds, because he's basically trying to hack himself, essentially, or he's hacking it at Elliot. He's looking through and seeing all these things. Oh, he's got all these friends, all these happy photos with Angela. But he eventually finds a hidden drive.
Do you know what I like to, just before we get to the hidden drive itself, is, you know, there's that, it's too perfect. He's getting that itch again that, you know, goes right back to the start of the show, that whenever someone looks too perfect, he has to hack them because something can't be right.
But he finds this hidden drive, and what he finds there is really suspicious. And I mean, obviously to him, but especially to us, because what he finds there is essentially sketches and drawings of him and characters from his. You know, we see Trenton and Mobley, we see Darlene. We see, you know, him in the hoodie, and
all the files are labelled like F Society.
Yeah, and he questions, "Am I his monster?" Which is obviously something we were speculating last week. You know, we were speculating as he is Mr. Robot, and this would be kind of like, you know, one step further than that. But
it's along those lines, yeah.
It's okay. This is all interesting stuff. But notably, when Feliot comes in, we have the scene sort of repeat from last time, and then they sit down eventually, and they're kind of talking this out. You know, Elliot asks him about these drawings and, like, you know, what is this? And he says, well, you know, I get bored, so I created, you know, a version of me that was this hacker superhero. And what I thought was fascinating about this is, I feel like we have talked about how he's like a superhero for a long time, since at least the start of season 3, maybe season 2.
Yeah, and definitely. It's been a while.
It does feel quite vindicating to find out that Esmail the whole time was thinking of it that way too. He didn't say it.
We weren't just projecting. Is what you mean there.
It's actually in there. You know, like this version of this Feliot actually thought of him that way.
Like the amount of times we referred to his hoodie as his costume. Right?
Yeah. So I really like that. Of course, I like that. But he does point out that, he doesn't want to be him because he's angry, has no life, is alone, and he's not normal. And then apologizes because he realizes he's just because he's like, if he's talking to this version that he's created, he's like, oh shit, I've just kind of told you your life shit.
And Elliot's like, I mean, he's not wrong.
Yeah, but notably when he tries to leave or he tries to call the police or whatever, they touch, and that's when the next quake happens. It's almost like any time something challenges who Elliot and Felliot are, that the world starts to crumble.
Yeah, because the first one is just Elliot's arrival in this world. The second one is when he smiles and he's thinking about accepting that, oh, maybe I could be in this world with Angela. It's that moment with the glass.
Yeah. And it's after, so Felliot falls and hits his head. I actually thought he was dead already at this point. Just because
so did I, actually, the way he fell. And it's like, well, that's a nice, easy way to just, jump in and replace him.
And the blood's going, and this was actually making me think of him. I don't want to spoil the movie because it's like the end of the movie, but it made me think of a good little sci-fi movie from a few years ago that I really like. But more than that. So Angela calls him, though. This is when he hears Angela's voice. And at this point, he's kind of in shock at what he's done. But he's actually hearing Angela's voice and Angela thanking him for the gift. And you have to let yourself be happy, something she says to him. I wrote down he's seduced by the fantasy at this point. Like, hearing Angela's voice and Angela actually saying to him, hey, we're getting married tomorrow. I can't wait to do this. Let's do it. This is where he fully basically decides that he's going to live in this world. Yeah, he's going to adopt this world. And there's been no Mr. Robot up until this point, for the record.
Yeah, it's just been him wandering around the world.
Yeah. Obviously, he does appear quite quickly in episode 2, but no Mr. Robot as of yet. But Felliot's alive, and this is the real sort of dark part of this, is that it's not just that he's going to choose to replace him, he has to actively make the choice to not only not help him, because it would be one thing for him to just like stand by and let him die. He actually, we don't see it, it's off camera, we just see him sort of reach down, but he does kill Felliot, he does lean down and kill him. And it's this kind of dark moment, and the music is really dark, and he just simply says that this was inevitable, that both of them can't exist in this world, which thematically is very important as well for where the show goes in the next episode.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the first episode. I mean, we got through that pretty quickly because
it's really quite straightforward, and like the first 2/3 of it, the filmmaking is really kind of by the numbers, unusual for Mr. Robot. Don't get me wrong, but nothing particularly interesting to talk about in the sense that it is very intentionally got a very normal TV sheen to it. So it kind of, it's less interesting to talk about in that sense.
Yeah, most of the meat's in the second half. That's for sure.
I think that's probably why they add these as a double more than anything, is because people probably would have felt unsatisfied with just this chunk.
Yeah. No, that's fair. And it also makes more sense to double it with this one rather than last week's, which you could have done. I mean, you could have had the cliffhanger of him killing Felliot and waited a week after that for the finale, but obviously it just makes more sense to have the double be the last week. But, So
there's just probably one. There was a great touch during that conversation with Felliot that
go on.
He starts talking to us, and Felliot's like, "What's that? What are you doing? What's that noise?"
Oh yeah, he can hear it. Yeah, Elliot is like,
and that's kind of cool. That was like, whoa, what's happening there?
Do you know what the sad part is though? Is that there's a moment very similar to this in the second half that I actually think tops it, but.
Do you think that moment is slightly undermined by the fact that we played that here?
I don't think so, but I do think the second one's better, and it makes this one feel weaker, given that we're talking about it in the same same episode, the same time period.
I agree, the second one's way better, but I just wanted to mention that when this happened, that was my feeling. I was like, oh shit, and as much as it's less important and and less of a big deal than the other moment, that's thought that was worth mentioning.
Yeah, so. Second episode obviously starts with repeating a couple of the moments at the end of the first one. He says he has to do a wipe down, and he showers, he cleans up, he puts on a tux, interestingly. He goes to get Felliot's car, which is notably in the position, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is where the car that he comes out of in 5/9, or 3 days after 5/9.
It is exactly that, because I recognise the graffiti on the wall behind it. It's the same car.
Same car as well, yeah. No, everything, which notably... I think is the only car that's not white. Is this car?
You could be right. Yes, because it's like a big black SUV.
Yeah, because again, every time he's walking through, because it was really noticeable in his street when he's like going out to the car and stuff, that every car he was walking past was all white. It was really noticeable. Yeah. But he gets a call from Price saying they're waiting for him at the beach, the wedding. He has to go to Coney Island. I actually there's not a lot of funny moments in these two episodes, but I actually laughed a lot when he stole the trolley from the delivery guy. He just sort of walks up and just casually picks up the big trolley and just walks up the stairs.
That is pretty funny. I think honestly, the thing I laughed most at is coming up in just a second. It's a nice little visual gag that cracked me up.
Okay, so Mr. Robot appears though. So he's got his tux on. He's put Felly in the box. He's going to cart him downstairs.
Did you see what was on the box? That's my visual gag.
Box. What was in the box? I didn't notice.
Self-storage is what's written.
Okay, that's pretty funny. So Mr. Robot appears and he's like, "Oh, I was wondering when you'd show up. And like there's a lot to catch you up on." He's like, "I can see that." And I think watching this a second time especially was really interesting, just from the context of Mr. Robot knowing exactly what this place is. And
I think it's obvious immediately, because I only watched once, but he's immediately on edge. He's a little bit shifty.
Oh, sure.
He knows.
But knowing the actual context, though, kind of enriches exactly every expression he's given him. Like, every kind of reaction he has to what Elliot says and the way he's trying to talk him out of this. And what Mr. Robot's purpose has kind of been since the start of the show, not necessarily since the start of his creation, but since the start of the show, really, makes a lot of sense in these scenes early on in this episode. But he does point out that you need to start seeing this for yourself. I can't just tell you this world's wrong. You have to see it for yourself. You can't just take his place, which again, it's actually an irony given where this goes, that's what he's trying to do right now. He's trying to take Felliot's place in this world. Yes. And he points out, says, "You're not him." He makes that very clear at the end of this as well.
And it's like, it will not be easy for you to just replace him.
Yeah. So he's outside with the box, though. And Dom shows up. And you knew it was going to be... You don't see her at first, you just hear the voice. And like she's like a traffic cop or whatever. And she's investigating, why he's parked here, and he acts so goddamn suspicious. Now, this is one of those scenes where, in a real-world context, it feels really convoluted, like just a line of questioning to get to the point where she's suspecting him of murder and wants to see inside the box. But in the context of this is actually not a real world, and... It's
like, at this point, it feels like the illusion shattered and the world is turning against him.
Yeah, it feels like the world's out to get him. The fact that he ends up being chased by multiple police cars, it feels like, no, the world's trying to purge the element that's invaded.
I think that the moment that really confirms it to me here is she has to see his ID, and she's like, "This looks nothing like you." And then that for me was like, okay,
we have to clarify the phrasing here.
Okay.
She does not. It's phrased very carefully. She does not say anything about appearance. She doesn't say you don't look like him. She just says this is nothing like you. I think it's very specifically worded to not talk about appearance.
Fair enough.
Because I think arguably, where we're going to go here, I still think theoretically the Elliot we're going to be talking about later still looks like Elliot, but this idea that everyone in here, except the people that Elliot's actually talking to, like, can tell that he's different. I don't know, I think it's very specific that it's not about appearance. She doesn't say that.
I get what you're saying, but I fundamentally disagree on the first part of that.
What first part of it?
That the other Elliot looks like, our Elliot. I think there's too many things in this episode that just add up to no, for me.
I mean, fair enough. But she does not mention appearance. She doesn't say you don't look like him. She just says you're nothing like him, which I think is
fair enough. I'm willing to stand corrected. I didn't write down the line.
Very key. So, but there's a quake when she sees the body inside the box. It quakes again. So, but as we get to the subway, Mr. Robot looks very desperate. Tries to convince him again, like, you have to kind of accept where you are. You can't do this. You can't just take over. Yada yada yada. It gets to the wedding, and this is where it gets really trippy because at this point we're not even trying to pretend this is the real world anymore, right? All the guests at the wedding are wearing F Society masks, and there's no Angela there. Mr. Robot gives him his hoodie because it's cold, so he's got the hoodie on, and I think it's very clear at this point that, like, we're building up to that scene from episode 4 of season 1, right? We're going to have that scene again where he's talking to Angela
in the arcade,
in the F Society arcade, and it just, like, you sort of realize that, holy shit, Esmail's had, like, this mapped out fairly well,
pretty immaculately,
yeah, since the start, because that's even it's a different version of that scene. Don't get me wrong, the dialogue's different, but like it's very much meant to be because what I loved here is when he brings up that you have been here before. It recontextualizes that entire dream sequence from that episode, and it still has all the value it had before when we were, pointing at the little hints and what they were saying and stuff. But the fact that it was literally no, he actually went to this world once before, kind of by accident.
Yeah, like it says, you slipped in your withdrawals, and I couldn't stop it.
Yeah, so Mr. Robot's like, okay, if I finally have to tell you what's going on here. This is a world that you created. Confirms the episode 104. And I do have to bring up something I don't like here, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. Which part?
Well, I said this last week. I still don't like the phrase "real Elliot."
Do you know what? I'm not gonna lie. When he said that, I felt vindicated. In how you what you say, just in the sense that you were so adamant of telling me off for saying that, and now I'm like, the show itself is using that. I feel justified. And
I'm going to criticize the show for using it. I don't like the phrase "real Elliot" for a couple of reasons. I'll get to them more in depth at the ending, but I don't like it. I don't like it because it takes away from our Elliot. It takes away from Mr. Robot, because to me they're all parts of him, right? And the episode actually says that later on as well. It actually uses my phrasing as well by the time we get to the end of the episode. And the way I'm choosing to take this is that this phrasing is really extreme, and it's being used to shock this Elliot into understanding what he's like sort of blockading, for what he's in the way of.
Sure.
It's extreme language used by extremists.
But accurate language.
I don't know if it's accurate. I don't like the phrasing.
I think the fact is, you are just going to have to accept that is how it was portrayed in the show, and therefore using the phrase "real Elliot" is absolutely fine, whether you like it or not.
Not my Elliot.
Really, we're doing not my Elliot.
Yeah, we're doing not my Elliot. I don't like the phrase. I kind of groaned a little bit when he said it. I did not like the use of the phrase "the real Elliot." I don't know why. I don't know why, but like I just. I'll get to it at the end. I'll get to that because it ties into the ending.
Sure.
But anyway, so he says you constructed this 1 year ago, which kind of lines up with the timeline of the show.
Yeah.
You trapped real Elliot here, blah blah blah. And
it's in a loop as well.
It's in a loop, yeah.
That theme from before.
And Elliot, says, "So is that the real Elliot then?" And he's like, "As real as he can be in this deluded fantasy," which I think is very important. We have never seen the real Elliot in this show. We get a glimpse of an eyeball at the end. That's it. We have never met real Elliot, really.
Yeah, and that's part of why I suggested that. Another thing that for me goes, okay, he probably doesn't look like our Elliot physically in the same way that, Mr. Robot is as much part of Elliot as our Elliot is, and they look very different. So I felt the same with this, where, the intentionally only showing us the eye made me feel like, okay, that's because they don't want to cast someone else and undermine the performance and say, this guy's Elliot now.
Well, no, I mean, I think the ending clearly makes it vague and open.
Yeah.
To what he actually looks like, but I can't actually think of a reason why he wouldn't look like real Elliot.
But why? I don't see any reason why he should necessarily.
Well, every other personality who looks different are all based on other people. He's still based on him. Like, there's absolutely no reason to me why he has to look different.
He doesn't have to, but I don't know. Like I said, I suspect he does, and the things in this just for me kind of lined up with that. Maybe it's just confirmation bias. It might well be, but for me, that's how it felt.
Well, that was the question. And that the eyeball, that close up, is that Rami Malek's eyeball?
I don't know.
But I'm asking if they said, "No, yeah, we shot Rami Malek's eyeball for that scene." What's your feelings on that? If that's true. It may not be. This is the thing. The problem with this line of thinking, though, is that sort of close-up in movies, like sometimes they'll use a body double just for the sake of using a body. And it doesn't mean that it's not meant to be that character.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think it's not who the eye belongs to that was, confirming it. Whether it's the fact that they intentionally didn't show us.
Yeah, no. I get the line of thinking. I'm just saying.
Look, if they come out and go, no, Elliot looks exactly the same, and that is Rami Malek's eyeball. I go, fine.
Esmail's never going to come out and say that. He's never going to say that.
But hypothetically, I would feel exactly the same about that as you do about the real Elliot, that maybe I don't like it, but I'm going to have to accept it. That's just the facts.
Okay. So yes. So he chases he sees Angela in the distance.
Yeah, she's standing off on the sidewalk.
Yeah, and she runs off. He chases her, and we go into the little alleyway, which I've not seen in a long time. Actually, that little alleyway that leads to the door to AF Society.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And they go in. The music's playing. Although notably, this time she actually finishes her sentence and calls him the mastermind, which is when the glitching properly happens.
So our Elliot has a title in the same way that Mr. Robot does.
Well, no, because the equivalent for Mr. Robot is not actually Mr. Robot. The equivalent for him is the Protector. That's the equivalent to Mastermind.
Yeah.
Because Krista, the Krista in the head, names them all. Right. But he ends with it. He ends up outside in the alleyway again, and Mr. Robot goes to the exit door. And things kind of freak out here a little bit. He kind of keeps glitching, and he appears outside in the pier. And like everyone looks at Mr. Robot. Like we get a little kid with a Kristen Slater face.
There's a lot of deep fakes going on there, and it looks weird and terrifying, and I don't like it.
And then eventually it gets to Tyrell. He turns, someone who thinks Mr. Robot turns him around, and it's Tyrell in a suit. It's not like frumpy Tyrell from last episode. It's real world looking Tyrell, and he shoots him. And it glitches again. He's in a grave, and Tyrell's digging a grave for him. And we hear the kids counting. It sounds like when they're playing hide and seek in the
and we hear that horrible howling noise from Tyrell's last episode.
And then of course we finally hear the real interesting part is Darlene's voice saying, Elliot, please wake up, which obviously tells us pretty significantly at that point. Okay, he's lying in a hospital bed right now. Like
there is, and I know there is a small but dedicated portion of the audience that firmly believes that Elliot is also Tyrell. And I'm sure they kind of took, they read into these scenes in a way that would, kind of back that up for them more. The idea of, it's him burying himself kind of thing.
But Tyrell literally had a job at E-Corp and was high up. Like it doesn't work.
I have argued that myself, and I cannot reconcile it. I just can't.
There's too many things he's done independently that too many other people have addressed. Like, I mean, Joanna, his wife, like, like she was also married to Elliot. Like, what? No.
No, I know. Like I said, for me, it just does not add up. But I'm sure there are people who are convinced. I know there are people who are convinced of this fact, and I'm sure that this scenes for them felt like they probably felt pretty vindictive for them.
And the truth is, I don't really have a whole lot to say about Tyrell's inclusion here or what any of Tyrell's stuff means. Tyrell's been kind of a weird character, and I'm not necessarily sure, like post season 1, his inclusion's been very kind of scattershot and very different.
It has,
and I don't know. I don't know what to say about Tyrell, to be honest. But then he ends up in the therapy room with Krista. He tries to leave. She, basically confirms what Mr. Robot's been saying. He kind of just loops back into the room and he tries to leave. He's looking for Darlene, but she explains she's not here. She's out there in the real world. But it's not a coincidence that Darlene's not in here because she's the one that would actually remind him of who he is. She's the totem. She didn't say that. I'm adding that. But she describes the personalities that were created. She says the Protector was created when he jumped out the window, and that's Mr. Robot, the one who's there to protect him. And I'd argue that specifically throughout the course of the show, he's been there to try and complete the Mastermind's work so that the real Elliot can come back. Like he's been there to try and help him save the world, as it's put multiple times. That the idea that Mastermind's there to save the world around so that it's better for Elliot.
It's just to save his future, right? Yeah. Is the way they put it, and I think the Protector probably feels that the best way to keep him safe is to do this long term. It works out for him,
which kind of in a way in hindsight does actually make it all work, where he was very antagonistic towards our Elliot for a long time and kind of over time became more along the line of thinking, okay, I'll help you accomplish what we're doing, hoping that would lead to the merging happening again. The second, this is the thing. So we've been talking about the third personality all season. There's actually 5 of them.
Yes,
not counting the host. There's 5. So one's the protector, Mr. Robot. 2 is the persecutor, which is the mother. So that mother we've been seeing in flashbacks, which we always thought was really mean and
kind of terrible.
Which, and admittedly, we always had the backup of that of Darlene also didn't seem to like her very much. So clearly there was, she wasn't a great person necessarily either.
Yeah, but I think it's definitely very much exaggerated. And it completely recontextualizes her death. And Darlene definitely cared more than Elliot did, right?
Yeah, so she's the persecutor. And then young Elliot was created. He doesn't actually get quite a fancy name per se.
No,
in the scene.
He's there to hold on to the emotion and and the feelings of what had happened.
And then Elliot, this is the neat part. Elliot says, "Well, she doesn't know about you," talking to us. And then Krista looks right at the camera and says, "Oh, I know about you."
Yeah, and she's, I don't know if you've written down the exact line.
Not the exact line, but
it was like you think you're just a voyeur just watching this, but you're involved. You're part of this.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay.
So we're so young Elliot's the third, we're the fourth, and Elliot's the 5th. The mastermind's number 5 out of the personalities. And it's this interesting thing where it's like, oh, so you're basically here because like really Elliot couldn't deal. He couldn't deal with what was going on in the world. He couldn't deal with what was happening. And that's where you know that Elliot isn't really an accurate representation of him, because like clearly really Elliot in the real world was a mess and was, maybe he was the one who actually freaked out and like trashed the server room. That may have been him, and not Mastermind Elliot.
Possibly.
Because that was something we heard about that happened before the show. We never saw it.
And we know he did, something that meant he had to get court-mandated therapy, which is why he was with Krista in the first place.
I thought that's what that was the trash in the server room.
So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, so that something lines up.
Although there is a theory online that we did see real Elliot technically once.
Oh, when?
And we may have seen small glimpses because we were speculating at one point that some of the emotional beats where he breaks down and cries might be real Elliot slipping through. Because we said that even before we started using the phrase real Elliot. We were saying that.
I actually don't think that anymore, weirdly.
That's fair, but I thought it's possible. I'd have to rewatch it with the new context to really have an opinion. But anyway, the theory is there's a flashback in season 2 where at the time when we saw this, and I remember thinking this, we thought we were seeing the birth of Mr. Robot, at least the current incarnation of him. However, with the new context of the Mastermind, what we're probably seeing is the creation of the Mastermind. It's a flashback to when Darlene comes over with the movie to watch, and he puts on the mask and the jacket and basically comes up with a plan for 5-9.
Yeah.
So there's a small chance that maybe at the start of that scene, before he does the transformation, that it's actually the real or the fully formed Elliot.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that stands to reason.
Yeah.
I buy that. I think just on the note of, talking about, in the other scenes that we'd speculated in the past that maybe it was the real Elliot coming through. I think in the context of where we have now, I think the fact that he, the real Elliot has been trapped in this world, and Mr. Robot, mentioned it earlier in the season that he only woke up for Darlene that one time. I think that is the only time he has woken up since he has been trapped, which is why the flashback still plays, like we have seen him, but and that was beforehand.
Yeah, I think, well, maybe then what's interesting though is like those emotional moments, like, because the one I'm thinking about where he breaks down crying, Darlene's in the next room and he kind of stands up again when she comes back in. I'm wondering if like all the moments that are potentially little glimpses of real Elliot, coming through, are they always in the presence or around Darlene? Are they always,
Yeah, I felt the only problem I have with this is you might be right. The only problem I have is that maybe does that undermine some of the the real emotional moments that he had with Angela.
Well, this is a potential problem that I'm going to talk about at the end, about how this reveal kind of maybe undermines some of R. Elliot's progress throughout the show, which is not something I'm sold on, but like I think there's discussion to be had.
I'm intrigued to hear your arguments, because on first immediate reaction is I don't feel like it does, but I'm willing to have the discussion.
I feel better about it now, but when I first finished the episode, I had some conflicting feelings about certain scenes, based on the new information. But
we'll get there.
Anyway, so Yeah, so we get the 5 personalities are talked about. And she looks at us again and says, even they agree with me. After she says it's time for you to finally sort of like realize the truth and accept this. And she looks at us and says, even they agree with me. And that's a little wink wink, because we're all like, yeah, we want answers. Get to the answers.
Do you know what? On that note, I'm amazed at just how much answers we got.
Yeah, although we still have that 3-day gap.
We do have that 3-day gap.
And we still actually, I mean, this is the thing, like, nothing in this episode, or these 2 episodes, prove the White Rose's machine didn't work. It proves that it wasn't turned on this time. It doesn't necessarily prove that it wasn't going to work if it actually was turned on.
Yeah, it may have worked if it had, if it had been moved to the Congo and was done safely. Theoretically, yes, it could have
and
worked.
Theoretically, Angela might have seen another world, like a real world.
Yes.
Possibly.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely possible.
And there is nothing damning that.
And maybe that's part of the charm of this, is that you keep that open. You keep that like up to us if we want to believe if it was real or not.
Was it all just people buying into this delusion out of desperation, right? Which would be really fitting with the theme here. Or was it real? Was there something to it? I think either one, you can choose and both work.
I mean, you could go on a way. I mean, not this could be the sole goal because so much else was going on, but could you buy that White Rose's fascination with Elliot is because she knew that he needed to be woken up, and that she believed that this would wake him up to an extent, like just in the sense that what happened, like the way White Rose herself came out was through a tragedy and through like this, like.
I get what you're saying.
I don't really think so. There's too many holes in it.
It doesn't add up to me.
I'm just throwing it out there as a wacky long-term goal. Anyway, so yeah, the idea was to take down the evil all around him, make the world better for Elliot. But Krista never realized that she wasn't talking to the real Elliot. And then ultimately says the hacker superhero is one that real Elliot dreamed up of. And there's some nice sentiments here about like us maybe being our own superhero. The idea that Elliot kind of created this superhero version of himself, and like
I think it's really fascinating that he didn't create a perfect version of himself. Clearly,
clearly.
But the idea that he created, a version of himself that had qualities that were better than what he assumed he had.
Yeah. I guess maybe it even goes into analyzing superheroes in general, and the idea of like alternate personas, and like this is almost like I mean maybe Batman's a good one to compare it to, like the idea that Bruce Wayne essentially just goes away and dies. Like Batman's the one who's the real personality from then on.
Just on that slight tangent on this,
yeah,
I like the third personality angle on that as well. Actually, I know that's kind of weird to say, but the idea is that Bruce Wayne is dead. He's just a mask. Batman out in the streets talking to Gordon and doing all that, also a mask. The only real Alfred, the only real Batman is Bruce sat in the Batcave with Alfred. When he's got his cowl down, that's the only and it's this kind of in between where he's not Bruce, but he's not Batman. He's just himself in that moment.
I don't really separate the Batman of the K. I think that's much better with Superman, because this is something that I've always said with Superman, is that the real Superman is not really Superman or Clark Kent at Daily Planet. It's actually Clark on the farm with his parents, because that's where he can be himself. I think it works much better with Superman, that analogy, but I mean,
I think it works with Batman for me personally.
Yeah.
See, now that I've said that, you're gonna look at sometimes when you see these scenes and read them that way and wonder.
No, I'm not, because I don't agree with you.
You are.
No, I don't agree with
you. You might agree.
But Elliot says, "I'm never giving up control," and the quake starts again. And it's like, no, if you wake up, you're just stealing life from Elliot now. Which, and of course, in the end of the last episode, he literally stole, he killed Elliot and was going to take over.
And we're kind of rooting against our Elliot now, because we're like, this feels wrong.
To an extent. Anyway, he wakes up, right? And we're in the real world for the first time in these 2 episodes. TV's saying, there was almost a meltdown, but it was averted. He looks over, Darlene is, sitting there just watching the TV, and he says her name. Says, "This is real, isn't it?" And he grabs her hand, and she reminds me, no, if you could grab my hand, then it's real. I'm here, and this is real. Blah blah blah.
And she has no idea how true that is.
And Elliot smiles and says, "I'm not going anywhere," when she gets upset. And it's this little smile. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to. Anyway, it has this kind of almost like desperation to it, like where he's convincing himself, yes, I'm staying around. Like, I'm not giving this up. And she mentions the room was shielded that he was in, and that's the reason why he's alive from the explosion. It was like a safe room.
Honestly, that's probably one of the only things I didn't like in the episode. That one had some super advanced new shielding tech, and I don't know, that just felt a bit easy. But sure, whatever.
Yeah.
It was one of those just because reasons, right?
I think that was the moment actually where I started to think of just some crazy theory about White Rose wanting him to like wake up.
I get that.
You know, like it was like, no, she's going to have him in this room to jolt him out of his world or whatever. I don't know.
I get why you would kind of go down, not necessarily that exact angle, but just to try and explain this.
But yeah, ultimately, it's not an important detail though. He has to be alive.
Which is why I said, like I said, ultimately, I don't really care. It just, it was, I noticed it. Is kind of what I'm saying.
But noticeably, Darlene says to him, "You saved the world, Elliot Alderson," and it's just this kind of thing that. That's kind of what he was told multiple times there, is that he was created to save the world, and he's succeeded.
Mission accomplished.
Yes, he's literally succeeded. And I wrote down Darlene's his totem, based on all the hand stuff and the touching and but he says this, this world's real, but I'm not Elliot. I'm only part of him, and this is where the phrasing got a lot more along with my line of thinking, because. I much rather prefer to think of him as part of Elliot, because my concern with this, the real Elliot, and then this is not the real Elliot, and all that, is that it kind of maybe hurts the ending for me if I can't accept our Elliot as part of who he is in a real tangible sense, because I've never met real Elliot. I don't care about real Elliot. I care about this Elliot. This is the Elliot that I've grown with. This is the Elliot that I've seen give fantastic. Last week I gushed over the speech he gave about love and people and the world, and like.
Do you know why? For me though, this doesn't matter. What you're getting at here.
Mm-hmm.
With the whole that you don't know real Elliot, and we don't. But that doesn't matter to me, because our Elliot, while he isn't real in the same sense, he is, sure, he's a part of him, but it's a very different part. I think it's just because this Elliot, he believed he was real, right? He was convinced that he forgot that he was a creation. He was unaware, and everything he experienced was still real, even if he wasn't the real Elliot. So I think for me, him having this moment where he has to choose whether or not to give that up. He feels real, even though he knows he's not. He has still had all those experiences. He still has those feelings. So that's why it works for me.
Yeah, it's just it's this weird thing where, like, because this is the character that I've cared about and the character that I've seen grow and learn so much, that to me, because of everything he has learned, because of everything he's actually been through, and because of speeches like the one he gave last week, because of scenes where he stands up to White Rose when White Rose is trying to tempt him into accepting the machine, and Angela's alive, and all those types of moments, like his strength through that and becoming a better person and ultimately fighting for everyone around him, to me says he deserves to live, that he deserves to be alive and to be in the world. And I'm okay with him merging with the others to realize that the full Elliot, the version that is an amalgamation of all of them, because they're all a valid part of him, and that's fine. And the idea that this is an Elliot who has all the memories and has everything and every part of him, and and everything with our Elliot makes sense. Where in the sense that there is every time like he remembered something new, whether it was Darlene being his sister, or whether it was just what his father did to him as a kid, it makes sense that these were all things that he didn't choose for this version to remember, and it wasn't until he was forced to confront them that he had to admit that they happened, right? Like, these were all things to try and make it easier for him, and ultimately like he had to accept all these things. But because he went through all this journey, because he went through all these things, and he did feel like he genuinely learned and became a better person. And yes, obviously, choosing to give up the control, if you will, and give it back to the host is kind of a sort of final noble act. But ultimately, the host is not someone that we have met and not someone that I care about. It reminds me a lot, actually, bizarrely, of a video game called Firewatch, where the ending of that really frustrated me because it told me to care more about someone we'd heard about in the past and not the character that he'd actually that our protagonist had been interacting with the whole game, and that ending really annoyed me as a consumer of that story.
I get what you're saying. I think for me though, I don't need to know real Elliot because everything is informed by R. Elliot's decision and how he feels about real Elliot, and it's just this whole. I don't know if I need him to have all the memories, back in, and physically.
Well, no, let me make this clear. It's not about him remembering everything that happened to him. For me, it's not about that. It's about everything that R. Elliot went through means he deserves to live. He deserves to thrive and grow and continue in the life that he made for himself. So to me, he has to be part of real Elliot. He has to be part of the combination that wakes up at the end. He has to be part of that, or for me, the character, like, it's one thing to say, okay, well, this was the story of this personality that lived and died, and that was the end of it, right? But this is the one I was rooting for, so he has to be part of that combination. The version that wakes up at the end has to include him, and it has to be part of him that's getting to experience the life from then on, because it's part of his strength.
See, I just kind of fundamentally disagree with that, all of that. Like, for me, I don't feel like I need that in any way. We get, we go into the boardroom, and they go through the corridor, and Elliot asks Mr. Ross, what's on the other side? Is it just is it a void? Will we be wiped from existence, essentially? And they go through, and it's a theater.
Well, hold on a second. You're missing his response is really important here. He says, "We'll always be part of him."
Yeah. In terms of the key emotions, I think they come from him. I don't think for me, I didn't interpret that as we will be part of him in a almost physical sense, in the way in the merging of personalities. For me, it was we'll be part of him in the sense of we'll have always happened, and we'll have always had an impact on the world in that way through him, and we're part of him in the sense that we come from his emotions. I think what we got to hear at the end, when they're sitting there. They're together, they're a family. What in the theater watching a film, that kind of is R. Elliot's happy ending. That is what he deserved. He got to have his family and be together with his family, and for me that works.
I guess to a point, but for me again, like Elliot talks about in the boardroom, when he's talking to us, he talks about how we're the parts that always showed up. We were the parts that were strong and were always there for him. We were the parts that, and to me, what these personalities represent are actually his strengths. It's like how Elliot's mind handled handled his past and his pain and everything he was going through. These are the parts that somehow were created, almost like a partitioned hard drive, right? That's how I would describe this. They're partitions of his mind. They were designed to handle stuff that he couldn't just handle on a whole, if you will. And I
think the slight problem with that analogy is you can't really repartition it and keep all the data, right?
Sure, if you want to nitpick at it, like, but the way you're interpreting this, if I take it just as the way you're saying this, I hate the ending. I can't interpret the way you're doing it because for me it ruins the show.
That's really interesting because for me it doesn't at all, and I like it.
And I love the final moment. I think it's executed flawlessly. I do. Yeah. Like M83 starts playing outro, and noticeably their song Intro played at the end of season 3. In fact, they had another song from another album that played in season 1, and I knew this track as soon as it started playing because I love that album. And we see there's this like stuttering effect on Elliot's face as he's watching the screen, and obviously the visual of Elliot sitting in a movie theater is something we've had before as well. It kind of recontextualizes why key moments and key flashbacks have been presented the way they have been. And then we go through the projector, which becomes the eye, and it feels like, and this to me did feel like they're merging. I actually read this journey through the eye as the merging, because all these moments that are cycling past the sides of the eye are all moments from the show. It's basically everything converging together, because Elliot's going to remember all this. When Elliot wakes up, he's going to be aware of this world. And there's a cynical point of view as well. Yeah, okay, let's say he doesn't remember all this and he wakes up. He has to be told that Angela's dead when he wakes up. So things aren't hunky-dory. Like, I mean, it's a happy ending, but it's a happy ending with a bittersweet tinge where things aren't going to be perfect. Things are going to be difficult. The whole point here is that he's just got a chance to be himself now, and a chance to actually process it as a fully formed human being.
No, I get what you're saying. For me, you talked about the line about how they're the ones that always showed up.
Mm-hmm.
For me, this was they're taking a back seat. They're not going to do anything. They're going to let him kind of learn to do it for himself in some ways, and become his own person without them in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's interesting how we've both had like kind of completely different reasons on the like. Don't I can see your point of view. I can understand, why you could think all of these things.
Yeah, because
if someone tells me that is the ending and I just have to accept that, that's fine. I'll go with it. But for me, I kind of prefer this way personally.
Every time we've talked about this, I've always referred to because this is the thing. Like we've essentially spoken about the same thing just through a different lens. Like a lot of this season, where I've always referred to this Elliot. I mean, I don't want to call him the mastermind because it feels so impersonal. But our Elliot is that. We all talked about him being created a few months before the show, and we talked about how, and I always said that, this is the version of Elliot without all these memories. Now, it's a bit more specific than that, because there is kind of this mastermind quality where you actually, kind of put, the core personality into, this world or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I've always thought about it as that rather than a straight up different personality. But ultimately, like, if it's a version of Elliot without these memories, but, obviously they added on the idea of him being a superhero, in a sense. Like, there is, a personality there, but I've always taken it as the personalities make up parts of who the overall person is. And a lot of the distinguishing that you're doing there, where you're saying, they'll take a back seat so he can do it for himself, clearly distinguishes the main personality as just a separate entity of all these. And I don't like that as much. And it does hurt the ending for me, because ultimately, when he opens his eye, and the final line of the show is Darlene realizing it's him, because that's the other thing we didn't mention is in the scene with Darlene, when he says, I'm not, I'm only a part of Elliot, which again, I like that phrasing, I'm only part of Elliot. She says, I know, and I've known since I came back. We kind of glossed over, we got such a debate about the stuff that came after. We glossed over the rest of that conversation. And I noted down that Darlene kind of, she says she knew since the start of F Society, she knew it was different, but and I put down the word selfishly here, that she, and not in like a pure, not in a demonizing way, but she kind of selfishly didn't kind of challenge it, because this was an Elliot that wasn't as messed up as the one she was used to. Because we actually get the impression from this conversation that really Elliot was actually kind of worse, that he was just kind of a wreck, and she didn't know how to talk to him.
They never really spoke, because neither of them really knew how to communicate with each other. And
part of that was on her. She said she got scared and ran away, which is kind of brings a new context into her choosing to stay. Like, 2 episodes ago, it's like she was going to run again, but she chose to stay. And here she, this idea that, she got to spend time with him, she got to feel like she was getting close to him, but it was kind of like with this blanket of, some of the rougher parts of him aren't there right now, and she's aware of that. And for the last few ever since the reveal of what happened to him as a kid came up, we've been saying we want this one-on-one with Darlene, and we got a little bit of it like a couple of episodes ago, but this was really the scene we were looking forward to. Because even though they don't talk about the abuse that happened, she clearly knows. Like there was no doubt in my mind as she was talking here that she knows what happened to him.
This is why she didn't know how to talk. I know there's a point where we speculated, did he abuse her as well? I think this tells me probably not.
Yeah, no. I think if she'd experienced it as well, as dark as this sounds, they would know how to
kind of talk. Over
yeah, they would see eye to eye in a weird way that they couldn't otherwise. But yeah, she says she didn't know how to talk to him. And he even says, because she asks, is he okay? And he says, I made a safe place for him. It's got everything he ever wanted. And I actually, as soon as he said that, says, well, no, because Darlene's missing. There's one key thing missing. And he eventually says that as well.
He doesn't actually tell her what's missing.
He doesn't tell her, but he says, like, it's clear that's what he's talking about, though. There's one thing that's missing. And ultimately, as she's leaving to go get the nurse, he says, I'm only a part of him, but I want you to know that I love you. And that's the moment where you know that he's going to give in. He's going to let the core personality come out.
And she knows as well.
I don't know if she completely knows as well. I don't know if I'd agree with that necessarily.
I think she does, based on the fact that when she comes back, we get her, the final line. I think she knew that was goodbye in that moment, because otherwise she wouldn't have straight away.
Yeah, but there's a moment before she says hello, Elliot, that it's more like a moment of like acknowledge. She realizes that it's him. Like she has to check. It's not like she just knows before she walks in that it's going to be him.
I think it just confirms her suspicion at that point, rather. But I think she was pretty certain that it was a goodbye, at least for me when I watched the scene.
I've watched it twice, and I didn't think I didn't get that she knew that he was going to like. I don't think she did, and I've seen it twice now. So
that doesn't mean you're just because you've seen it more, you're right.
I know, but I'm saying I saw it again with you know.
No, I get what you're saying.
Knowing where it's going, and I still felt the same way. I still felt like that she didn't know where it was going. Because I felt genuine like happiness in a surprising way in the final moment where she realizes it's him, and she can tell right away that it's him. And says hello, Elliot. And I think it's genius because I think there was obviously an obvious joke like for all this season that the final line has to be goodbye, friend, right? Because
this is a complete reversal on that I love.
Yeah, this is a good subversion of expectations.
Yes,
because it means so much more. Hello, Elliot. So perfect final moment.
Definitely.
And I think it's interesting that there is a couple of different ways to read this, and if I take it literal as a separate entity and that real Elliot is real Elliot and that everyone else isn't, I kind of hate the ending. But
I mean, that's look. You interpret however you want, right? And just and however it is that makes you enjoy it, that's great. I think it's open enough that I feel like I can see both sides here.
And I feel like someone who understands DID like really well could probably like say this is definitely kind of which way you should lean to, but I think for the sake of a story and like in a piece of media like this, like I think like for me it has to be the way I've kind of talked about it, at least to some extent, because I need to like the Elliot we watched has to matter, and not just in the sense that he's given everything up for quote unquote real Elliot. Like I need him to have part of this happy ending. It can't just be a sacrifice because he's earned it.
For me, him having being able to sit and experience with a family, and that is a happy ending for me in that regard. So he is getting something out of it.
Yeah, I don't really read that scene that way at all. Like he's getting happiness because he's sitting there with his fake family, who are really just all other personalities. I don't know. I never got that from that moment for me. I just never played that way. But I love it. Like I think this is an excellently executed finale. I think it's interesting that I have loved this show almost unconditionally, but there's definitely a way to read this ending that I don't like, and it's the first time in the entire show that that's been possible for me, really. Where I've went, if Sam Esmail ever like outright says that something to outright sort of like lean more towards what you're saying than what I'm saying, I'm going to dislike it.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I think Esmail, I hope, is smart enough to never say anything, because
he should keep his mouth shut.
Absolutely, and as much as I have my opinion on, okay, that's the angle I choose to read it as, and I would not, if he told me, oh no, Pete, Pete, you're right, it's that way, I'm not going to be personally that upset because I still like that interpretation. It's just not the one that I personally lean to. But I think there will be a large amount of people who will be very disappointed if he ever confirmed either direction. Right?
Yeah, because I think just to kind of sum up how I feel here, like I say, our Elliot through this show has become a better person. He has went from like the creation that he started off as to being a fully fledged human being who has learned so much and realized his rights and wrongs and tried to course correct and try to be a better person, even through the pain, and all these variations that have happened throughout. And like I say, speeches like the one from last week, the culmination of the dark the Dark Army and the Deus Group stuff, like all of those moments, like it doesn't matter when he started. It's like he became real, and because he became real, he deserves to have some of the victory. He deserves to live and continue. And
I absolutely understand all of that. I think for me, even if he does deserve that, part of the tragedy is maybe he doesn't get that necessarily. He's not reabsorbed back in any sort of sense. for me, the fact that he did his job, he made the world a better place, and he can kind of go out at peace with that fact and leave the world in a better place more than not. Obviously, Angela's the iffy part on that there. With for real Elliot, and he can leave that, and he can be happy knowing that that he's leaving that behind, and also not only did he make the world a better place in terms of the bigger picture, he brought Darlene back into his life, because obviously this is the thing. Despite the fact that they obviously had a very strained relationship, because we get that from what Darlene said.
Mm-hmm.
Real Elliot obviously thought the world of Darlene, otherwise she wouldn't have been his trigger in the first place. So that connection was there on his side the whole time. They just didn't really know how to communicate. I think now that Elliot has brought Darlene into it, she can just communicate with the real Elliot better from here, and and understands what she needs to do better now to help the real Elliot in that sense. So again, it's all about, for me, our Elliot choosing to give up all of this for someone else. It is, it's the noble sacrifice, and maybe he does deserve to live. Maybe he does deserve to be the one that kind of got to stay in control in some way, if you wanted to go that route. But I think ultimately, that's a part of the tragedy of it.
Yeah, and there's a line actually from Elliot when he's talking to us before he goes through the door, where he says we have to let go too, and it's not lost on me that I'm kind of saying no, I'm not going to let go. Screw you.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like, it's this kind of thing where, in a real world sense, the way you're interpreting it might actually be the more accurate one in the way that, yeah, if this is a real person and this is a personality that was created, then yeah, it should go back to the real person. But ultimately, I don't care, because in the context of the story, in the context of who we have experienced this with, in the context of who we have cared about and who we have attached to, and the journey that we've had, this, like, it's kind of like when we talk about like stakes in movies and TV shows and stuff, and we talk about how you can say that the entire world's in jeopardy and millions of people die.
Unless someone you care about, but you don't really give a shit.
But it really needs to be like one person being under threat is more impactful if we care about that one character, if we care about that one person. And ultimately, real Elliot, as it were, if he's a completely separate entity that we have never met, and that these characters that we've been following aren't genuine parts of him that are now still parts of him, ultimately, we've never met him, and he's just an idea. He's not really a character. He's an idea. He's a...
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. Like the idea is fine, but I need to care about the characters.
And that's okay, right? We'll probably talk about Mr. Robot again in the future. Not necessarily on a video like this, but in conversation, we'll talk about it. And I think it's okay that we have completely different reads on the ending, and I don't think, even though they are incompatible in terms of the core ideas themselves, I think both of us got what we wanted out of the ending, right? Both of us. If we hadn't actually had this conversation, and you just had the way you read it is the way it was, and that's just it, you never read any other opinion about it, you'd be really happy with it. And so would I. And I think ultimately that's kind of what matters most, is if your personal read is if as long as it fits the narrative and it works for you, and this goes for anyone who thinks Tyrell is somehow Elliot as well. If all the facts line up for you,
he's not.
No, I don't believe so. But ultimately, I don't believe that Pete's right. Pete doesn't believe that I'm right here at the end. I don't believe that Tyrell is connected.
Yeah, but you've got more of an argument than the Tyrell believers.
I know, but hey, if you want to believe that Tyrell is part of that, and and that's the way that you can read this that makes you happy, great, go for it. Just not everyone has to.
I'll tell you this: I am definitely happy that Darlene and Angela and everyone else we've been seeing were all real, because I said last week, one of my concerns was if it turns out everything's been in his head, the entire show will be pissed, because
that would have been different.
Yeah, they all have to be real, and I'm glad that there's no mistaking that by the end of this, which is good, because I'd be really upset.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that this would be a very different conversation if that were the case. Because as much as we're having disagreements on the ending, that would have been the core premise of the show thrown out of the window in many regards.
Yeah, and the good thing about this is that it adds that recontextualization to every single time. Like watching this show from the start, now with the knowledge of that Mr. Robot's there to try and basically finish the mastermind's work so he can go away again and bring back, the core Elliot. And to me, just to kind of sum up why I, just to sort of like my last point on why I read it the way I read it is, when we come out of that eye, we see a tear come out of the eye. Like this Elliot waking up, like he's impacted by the events that have happened in some way. That's why the tear is there, and it's notable that we see our Elliot having a tear inside the movie theater before we go through the lens to the eye. And maybe for me that's my tangible link. It's like no, like this is part of him. Yeah. Like that's why there's a tear there, because he still has the memory of everything that happened during this time. And maybe that's what's unique about this time he comes back, is that in previous times when because as Darlene's pointed out, when you forgot again, like he's went away at times before.
Yeah.
Maybe this is what's different about this time, is that this time he gets to keep the experiences, he gets to keep what happened.
Well, maybe, yeah.
It's not, they're not going to hide it from him anymore, because now he does get to be the fully fledged person.
You might well be right.
So yeah, that's where I stand on it. And if I'm looking at the show as a whole, obviously it's a fantastic show. Obviously it's been one of the favourites we've had. We're just about to do our top list of the decade, our top 10 of the year, all those things. Is it perfect? No, there's a couple of faults. I think Tyrell actually, and probably Joanna, who was set up to feel like she was such a big deal, her exit of the show might be the biggest blunder, just from a like, oh, that was weird. Like,
I agree with that.
And it never really felt like afterwards that they justified why they killed her off that way. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, all right.
No, I agree. And maybe this is the biggest argument for why the Tyrell, is part of Elliot, is that it gives some context to Tyrell throughout the show and kind of ties him in a way that I don't think any other way does, satisfyingly.
Does that mean Joanna's also Mr. Elliot?
No, I think Joanna, in from what I've read, Joanna is real and is married to Tyrell, and it's more less that Elliot is Tyrell, in the sense of but more Tyrell was, so to speak, kind of the core personality, the real Elliot, so to speak.
Okay.
In some ways. So he actually did have that job, and what he did as Elliot was this extra personality that was created to go and do something different on the side. But like I said, for me it just doesn't line up. There's too many things that just don't work. But I mean, I understand why the appeal is there, to try and contextualize Tyrell in a way that fits the narrative better.
I think it's okay that part of it's just not perfect. I think that's just okay. Like, it proves that Esmail's a human being. And, not every single line of the show connected to be this masterful thing. Only 95% of them did, and 95% is a pretty good number.
It is, and I think we can safely say Esmail is the best director on TV in the last decade, if nothing else.
Sure.
Whether or not you feel about the show.
He's doing Battlestar Galactica. He's doing a sci-fi show next. He's actually going to be doing space shit with robots.
Like, if anyone didn't check out Homecoming for whatever reason, because I mean, Amazon didn't really promote it at all, and you might have missed it. That's all directed by Esmail, and it's fantastic. Again,
he's producing another USA show that's starting in January. He's not writing or directing it, admittedly, but he's producing one. And he's got a movie with Rami Malek coming out next year, and he's working on Battlestar Galactica. So there's plenty of Esmail related content popping up in the future.
And I think maybe some people have opinions on him as a writer that are slightly different to us, but I think as a director, I think it's pretty clear that stuff has been flawless.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the writing is pretty immaculate as well.
We're both on that opinion. That, like you say, 95%, yeah. But I think the direction is even higher than 95%. Is kind of what I'm getting at there.
Yeah, absolutely immaculate TV. This, it'll be a while before something feels like it's filled the void of Mr. Robot. Obviously we were kind of spoiled in 2017 with both a season of this and Twin Peaks. Like Twin Peaks, if that new season of Twin Peaks was after this, that'd be filling the void of Mr. Robot for a year.
Yeah,
but we don't have as good as some other stuff is. It's not quite the same. It's a very different type of show. But Better Call Saul is kind of in the caliber in terms of quality.
In terms of quality, it absolutely is, but it gives you such different feelings,
Yeah.
and again, it's so character, right? And Thor on this is as well, and again, both have excellent direction. But it's such a different feeling that I get when we watch that and we talk about that. We're talking about it's all about the tragedy of his life, right? And how we're just wanting things to go differently. Uh, this here we are theorizing about all sorts of things over the past few years, and and unpicking things in a way that I don't think we did with Better Call Saul ever. We probably never will, because it is a phenomenal show, but it's not designed to be unpicked in quite the same way as this.
No, I feel like when we're talking about Better Call Saul, we're more talking about just the craft of writing and the craft of direction, and just how it handles its moments to these perfection sort of
I think
scenes.
Twin Peaks is probably the only thing that we've covered that's been close to the same discussion as Mr. Robot. And
yeah, Westworld kind of dabbles a little bit in the mystery, but it's not quite the same.
It's not quite there, is it?
Yeah.
As good as it is. And honestly, I think you say, "Oh, what will fill the void next?" And I think it'll be something that comes out of nowhere.
Oh yeah, we won't know. Again. Yeah,
it won't be something we can predict, and or coming up and we go, "Oh, that looks like it's going to be that." I think it'll just be something we try.
I mean, the obvious ones maybe Esmail's Battlestar Galactica, just because it's him.
Maybe, sure, but maybe he goes somewhat more traditional with that because he wants to do Battlestar Galactica in some way, not be weird Esmail stuff.
Yeah. Maybe he's going to get these big budgets for it because it's going to be a bit more of mainstream appeal, and therefore maybe not quite as wacky. But I am sure probably still very tight in terms of what it's doing.
I'm sure, if nothing else, his direction will still be excellent if he's directing any of it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure he will be. Like he's just
I'm sure running at least the first one, and probably some others. But don't know if he'll be doing all of it like he has done with like this and Homecoming. Because I think he directed all of Mr. Robot from season 2 onwards, every episode. I think he did a handful of episodes in season 1, and then all of 2, 3, and 4, which is quite a lot, really.
Oh yeah, it's a shit ton. So
and especially on TV, that's unheard of, really.
Yeah. Jeez. Do you know what? There's so much recontextualization that there would actually be an argument for reviewing the whole show again at some point. Like going through each episode with the knowledge of what it's actually doing.
It would be a completely different set of reviews because we would be doing full spoilers from the start of the entire show.
And it wouldn't be. I imagine it wouldn't be as long per episode, but there would be an argument for no, let's watch episode 1 again with the knowledge of what actually is going on and what Mr. Robot actually represents
in that context.
Yeah, there actually would be enough there to do that, and I'm not suggesting we do it anytime soon, but I think it's a possibility. At some point.
I kind of agree.
The Mr. Reboot, we'll call it.
So terrible.
Perfect. That's what it is. It's perfect. Damn it. Dear. And I'm sure there's like ideas and theories that we've had all over the season and past in the show that are probably worth bringing up again and recontextualizing. But I can't remember them all because we've brought up so many, goddamn many, and I'm sure a lot of them work and a lot of them don't. But
yeah, like obviously we talked about time travel for a lot of season 2. I think it was that we were talking about that a lot. We talked about the plane theory at points, and okay, we kind of got not an ending to that, but kind of a reference to it in a way. No, I think all these things are interesting and going, knowing which of these crazy theories are true and which ones are kind of just nothing. Red herrings, so to speak. Yeah.
So there you go. That's Mr. Robot. That's the series finale. And it's series finales are kind of this wonderful thing that only come along once in a while, where it's a show you really care about that's been good throughout, and you get that send off where it's like this heartfelt goodbye, and it's always kind of a special moment. So do cherish it if this is one of the first big shows that you've really become obsessed with, and this is your kind of first time that you've followed the show through at the end. Really enjoy the ending feeling, because as long as they don't flub it, which can happen, it is kind of a special feeling. I remember feeling at the end of Buffy. I remember feeling at the end of Lost, and the end of The Shield, and like just Breaking Bad. Yeah, all these different shows, and some do pull it off better than others. Sometimes you'll be surprised with how good the Fringe finale is. Like, hey, they actually made one of the best episodes of the entire show and really did this beautiful bow on it that I did not expect.
And sometimes they're just kind of really safe and nostalgic, and like, hey, look, we made it.
Yeah,
and you're like, I mean, that was fine. It was all right, but it doesn't satisfy you in the same way.
Yeah, so There you go, Mr. Robot. Let us know what you thought of the finale and the ending and the reveals and all the rest of it. Get us on the Twitters at mail_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the show and everything we do, rate the podcast on Apple Podcasts, give us 5 stars. More people will find us that way. If you want to support us financially, you can do that at patreon.com/mailfuzztv. You can do that for as little as $1 per month and keep all the content coming. And of course, you can check out all the stuff we're doing. We're working through Expand Season 4 from Amazon right now. Be on the same feed as this, obviously also on YouTube. On the Netflix feed, we're just started Lost in Space Season 2, so you can check out that. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff coming in the near future as well.
Very different type of discussion on Lost in Space.
Better Call Saul's coming in February, and we have a lot of stuff coming in January and March, and just, at the start of the year. And hopefully one of the new shows will strike a chord and become our new Mr. Robot, but only time will tell.
Yeah.
But hey ho, that has been us. That has been the Mr. Robot series finale discussion. No doubt there's 100 million different theories and interpretations that you can add to it in the comments. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. And as weird as it is to say this at the end of a review, it's because it doesn't feel like the ending of something, but hello, Elliot.